reassembly time. After you get your house in little pieces like I did, if you want to go that far, first thing you need to do is put the clown face back on, or else it won't fit behind the bears unless you take those off. Next, what I did was I snapped the bottom step in, put it in an angle, and clipped in this side. That way it's one piece again. Something I did do before I turned on the camera was I put the gearbox back in, just because you have to try and line up the eyeballs the way you want them. So the gearbox is in. The next section is this piece. I went ahead and slid this back on and stuck the 2 screws in. So the belt, you can see the gear turns, the belt turns. The reason this one's going in next is because it's a pretty easy click in. Just line up all the different clips. Make sure that the gear, this gear, goes inside this notch first. You might have to rotate the belt a little to get the teeth to line up from. So, go. Tipping this piece forward a little just to give me a little bit more play, just so I can make sure those teeth mesh perfectly. There we go. Clip the back in. Of course, when it clipped in, it popped the gear back out. So. There we go. There we go. All the pieces, the snap, you gotta get the front, the back, and the sides, all the get into their little clips. That. Next, get this out of the way. This just, of course, goes up here. It's not going to click into anything because there's no supporting walls, but you can balance it a little bit, just to make sure the alignment's right on the back, which it is. Next is probably one of the harder sections, which is all of this. Actually, that one goes on that side. So you have the backing plate, one of the side plates, the pulley, and the sidewall. Now, if you remember on the disassembly, this one was the harder one to get to come out because of the way they had it put in. You have to kind of flex your screwdriver. So that's why I like these small ones, is because the first screw goes right here. So you have to line up that gray gear with this top white gear, get the hole and the teeth to mesh. So there we go. Just rotate the belt a little bit while you're doing it, and it should line up fairly easy at that point. The screw I only put in about 3/4 of the way, and that's so I can get this other screw in, which is behind the belt. One thing that would make life easier is if they put a hole straight through that you could slide a screwdriver in and be more straight. Because when you do a screw slightly at an angle, you risk damaging the head and stripping the head. And now I'm just walking it in so it goes in square since the screwdriver is not straight. And the belt's locked because it's all engaged with the teeth of the mechanism. This one, the tooth has to line up. Now, something I did realize is I didn't weather this gear. So I will weather it when it's on the house. Like I was saying in the last one, is anything that's missed, I'll do when it's fully assembled. And I also forgot to weather the piece of wood. Put the flat screw on. There we go. Screw it in. So there we go. You definitely see the difference between weathering and factory. And this piece was glued to the side here. That was the one that has the hot glue residue right here. So get your hot glue gun out. And plug it in. Let that heat up. While it's heating up, I'm going to use a small blade screwdriver and scrape off the glue residue. Because it's hot glue, it scrapes off relatively easy. You don't have to use a heat gun unless you want to. Because it's plastic, I'm not going to. I don't want to distort the plastic much more than I've been doing to take it apart. But this is that clip that holds this up. So we're going to have to glue it in like so. And you have to do it before you put the wall back on, because the wall helps put pressure against it. And this wall will help hold up the roof. So, and while that's warming up, if you saw this wall, you might notice I drilled a hole in it. So this is where the window goes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run a little LED in here so this window, which is on the side of the building, glows. Just a little addition. I'll show you the soldering and everything and how I'm going to hook it up once the wall's in place. It's just going to be a little flat green LED. Just this little guy. You can use a round one if you want. I'm just using a flat one so I can glue it better on the inside. So I'm going to modify it just a little bit from the factory one, since I wasn't able to get lights inside of the eyeballs. Just clean it up some with the glue while we're waiting for the glue gun's ready. I'm just going to put the glue on the back corner like they had it. And slide the plate in. Make sure it lines up in the front part. And give it a little bit of a squeeze. There we go. This fits in those two clips, and then this part right here on this side fits in right there. So And then you got to make sure this gear, when it goes through, that the silver shaft, the point, fits in that white boss right here. That's the hardest part to line up generally. There we go. That was actually a lot easier than I thought. Put a little extra dab of hot glue on the back edge here. Get rid of the snot lines or the spider webs. Ooh, the wires. And there's 3 screws. So we're going to screw those back in. That'll help keep everything square while we're assembling. Also, they're required so it doesn't fall back apart. It has holes for 4 screws, but the 4th screw you won't be able to get to, which is probably why they didn't put it in, because it's covered by the plate for the gear drive. Probably something that designed on paper, looked really good, and then when they made it in real life, they couldn't implement it due to overlap. So, now the pulley in the back wall is installed. I'm going to move the roof again. And now we're going to try and clip this sidewall in. It's a little bit tighter of a fit because of the trash can. Kind of bring it down and slide it forward. And make sure that all the grooved, tongue and groove slots fit together. And then just pop it into its bottom clips. Make sure the wall lines up inside of the notch I was pointing at a minute ago. And now this sidewall's on. Which this sidewall has enough strength to now hold up the roof. So, just put all the little clips in. Just a piece of glue hanging, just cleaning it up a little, tightening it. Some wires that came unplugged, and let's plug them all back in. Also, we unplugged a few, so we got blue and blue. So the great thing about doing that color paint. Next thing I'm going to put in is the speaker. Now this big circuit board is actually labeled. It says SP, which means speaker. That one says P1. This one says DY2, and this one says DY1. So they're probably referring to P. It's probably the motor for pulley. Alright, that wall's in the right place, so I'm going to hot glue the speaker down. I was going to use a lot of Gorilla Glue. Decided against it in case I have to take this apart for when it fails. Gorilla Glue or acetate glue is hard to break free sometimes. That's why it was designed the way it was. So I am going to just do most of this with hot glue so I can crack it back off and or just heat it back up. Alright, speakers in. Sticking in that piece of wood, and all I'm doing with the tweezers is pulling off those glue strings again. Pushing it down because it's trying to lift. There we go. Next is this far wall. Lifted the edge of this a little bit, slid this in to where the one clip lines up, pushed it in, and then re-snapped it all back together. I'm sure you heard the click. And of course I just grabbed it by the wood and put it back off. Let's try that again. Wire in that light. I'll show you how I'm going to do it. First I'm going to do is get some wire. So, I've got a piece of green and black. Only mainly because it's a green and black wire, or light. You know, green for the light, black for the ground. Any color you want. Strip the ends. And let's get the soldering iron going. And just wedging the light in my tweezers for soldering because my helping hands that I have are inside of a bigger project at the moment. So, I have some solder. I'm going to tin the leads. There we go. Tin the wires. Now I cut them a little long. I usually do that so I can just trim off the excess. So it's easier to trim them when they're tinned because they're rigid than when they're not tinned because they fray since they're braided wire. I'm just going to attach the wire real quick. So, like that. That wall that I drilled a hole in, I'm going to feed the wire through, like so. And I'm going to now glue up here, and then some glue around the edges. Some glue on the top, glue on the edges. First thing I'm going to do is stick the light in, like that. Pull the wire through, oops, as I'm sticking the window frame on. And you can hear it. So that's what it looks like from the inside. It almost looks factory because it's the same color code as the factory wires, green and black. So we're going to strip back the wire. I'm going to trim the black. Cut off, I don't know, 1.5 inches. The reason I'm doing that is it needs a current limiting resistor. The light, the LED, can only run at about 2.2, 2.3 volts safely. 2.5 is the maximum you want to go. Anything above that, you'll start to overheat or burn out the LED. It'll get dimmer because you're overdriving it. So I have this set with this being at 4.6 volts, since the AC adapter runs a little high. Need a 150 ohm resistor. You can go as low as 100, because like I was saying before, if you do this, you got to hook it up to the incoming power and not to the circuit board, unless you want to hook it to the incoming power of the circuit board, but not anywhere after that point. You don't want to branch off of one of the other sections, because you'll change the balance of the circuit board. And some of the computer chips, like those little, the blob chip and stuff, are probably sensitive to changes. Cut off about half of one side of the resistor as the lead goes. I'm going to tune that real quick, and then I'm going to stick it on the black wire. You can stick it on the hot or the ground. I'm just doing it on the black. So. And you can use heat shrink or electrical tape or liquid electrical tape. But I want to cover these so it doesn't touch anything. So here's a small piece of heat shrink in black. And that. So, and on the circuit board, the incoming power is these two pins right here. You just follow this red and white black wire that comes off of the AC adapter plug right there. And you could technically solder there. I wouldn't recommend it because you're really close to these two components, which are resistors. Alright, sorry, diodes. These are diodes. This print's so small. Because if you slip and burn one of those, you risk damaging it, and then of course your system's not going to work correctly. So you can solder where these are, where the black and red wire come in here. Which is why I made these leads so long, so I can actually solder here and here. So then I can still pull this back apart if I need to, and just lay the door down, or the back wall. It's not really a door. Alright, so this is the motor. speaker. This is the circuit board. The only problem I do have is I have a light that fell out that I don't know where it came from, so I'm going to have to look at the video. I know where it plugs in. I don't remember where in the house it was, which I'm going to have to go back and look at my previous so I can actually hook it up before I put the rear door in. It should be the rear wall. Yeah, I should probably do that now. I believe it goes up here. I got more glue. But I'm not sure, so I'm going to double check so I can install this light and then solder the wires on, put the back on. I'm going to try and put the circuit board back on this little pegs I was pointing at before. If I can't, I'll just twist it up like it did and shove it in there. There's nothing in here that it's going to hit as far as moving parts. So give me a moment to figure out where this one piece of wire goes with the one little LED, just to make sure I put it in the right spot, and then I'll be back. Okay, we're back. Went and did research by looking at my previous video. This light actually went inside here. So I'm going to put a dab of glue. Remember me saying you should label it? Yeah, don't listen to my own advice. Hold that for a second without burning my finger. And then I'll go over the circuit board because I also checked that and I plugged one in wrong, so I'll tell you where the correct positions are. There we go. Alright, on this circuit board. I'll try and zoom in and make it a little easier to see. Center. There we go. Let's get a little tighter. There we go. This one is your speaker. This green and black wire here is the roof lights, which are plugged in right here. Those are the lights that go right here on this side, this green and black wire right there. So that's the roof lights. Of course, that's your volume knob, the big 5-wire connector. This wire right here is the electric motor, which is, if you're holding the circuit board like this, it's the one to the left of the incoming power, which is these two wires in the middle, the red and black. And this last green and black wire is the distribution board right there. So, from looking at it this way, left to right, motor, power, distribution board, volume knob, roof, this side, and speaker. Sorry. I think when I had it plugged in, I had them, or two of them reversed, which would be bad because, again, it's the voltage. That's why I want to double check, because I did not label them. I can always just review my previous video. That's all I ended up doing anyway. Main thing was that one light. It fell out and didn't see when and where it fell out of, so I have to find it to fix it. Okay, so also, while that was happening, I did glue these two lights back in, the ones that were hanging, so they're not hanging. Now we just got to put it back together without breaking them free again. So we'll use a little box and try and put it on the sign like I was doing before. Move this over, get rid of all the glue strings. Are everywhere. Alright. Now we need to solder the resistor and the power to the power, the incoming power. Just going to cut off a piece of insulation. I'll slide it over. And I'm going to slide it up out of the way. Soldering iron. And like normal, I'm going to pre-tin, putting fresh solder over here so that we get a good bond on this old connector. That's the positive. The negative is on the bottom side. A little harder to get to. That's why I use a fine point soldering iron. That. Clean that off. And the negative was the resistor. So tin, I put a little loop in the end of the resistor wire. That way when I tin it, I can maybe get a little pool to form in the middle. Which I did, it just fell out. Like so. So there's a little puddle. That way I have more surface area for soldering, because this is a precarious spot where I don't want to burn anything. And when you do this, make sure that you have your power unplugged. And now we do the hot. Which I didn't let cool long enough. Ooh, that's getting hot. There we go. Probably should have used some flux. It probably would have been a little easier and faster. Slide. This is a nylon insulation, so it's not heat shrink. It's just wire insulation. That way I can slide it back up if I have to replace a resistor. And since I have it tipped, that second wire slides inside here. Under this, there's a slot right there. That other light that I couldn't remember where it went. And let's see if these holes in this board actually do line up to any of these pins. No, they don't. I think they would have. If you remember me saying that on the first video. So, just shove them in there. If you want to retwist them, you can. So they're not going to get in the way of anything. So I'm just going to shove them in there at the moment. Let's see if I can get this back to pop in and make this thing a rigid house again, because it's pretty flimsy feeling. Again, it's plastic and it clips together, so it needs all its walls for strength. There we go. There's that one. That one. There, she's back together. A couple of small pieces need to be put on, like this pipe right here. It goes like so. So Dab of glue there. Dab of glue there. Stick. Stick. Hold it for a couple of seconds. Plug the hot glue gun. These professional grade ones get real hot, or the heavy duty ones. The glue just starts pouring out of them. Also takes longer for the glue to harden because it gets hotter than the little hobby ones that take the small sticks. All right, so she's back together. Now, I guess we got to test it. See if I was successful or not. If you notice, I didn't do a lot of glue. Since it snaps together, I'm not going to glue it together. I don't move my houses that often. Maybe if I have to change the power head because it burns out, or if I have to move, which hopefully I don't have to do that for a long time. But or if I have to pull them off the shelf for maintenance. That's about the only times I ever move my houses. So I'm going to use a sparing amount of glue. Reposition the lights that I bent, like so, like so, and just lower the light a little. And light. And for the side, which of course the lights are so bright it's overpowering it, there's that little window. We'll zoom in on it so that way the camera will adjust without having all the extra light. So now you can see this window has a little green light. Not much, not a huge modification, but it's enough that makes it different than all the other ones. And what that light did is it illuminates the one that I couldn't find. It illuminates behind the windows here, which is dim compared to these white lights, which is swamping out the camera. And remember where I put it, right there. Let's see what it looks like with the eyes being hit with some UV light. Off again. Just go in, so you can see. Of course, I'm using a spot. If I use like a generic flood, you won't have this intense beam that you can see everywhere as I move it around. And even if I go really far away from it, you can still see the glow. So as far as making them light up, that's going to be really difficult because of the thickness of the plastic. And I didn't want to risk getting any wires caught in those gears by filling the back of his head here with lights. So I think a Max blacklight pods, because there's two attached to one battery pack, would be the best choice for this. So overall, still not a big fan of the plastic, but I'm actually liking it only because of how taking this apart and putting it back together. It's a pain in the butt with the type of glue and resin they use, since they use at least two different types. They use the hot glue, or a hot melt glue, and a resin, which made it more difficult to break those pieces off. So that's kind of an annoyance, but I understand why they do it. These are not designed to be repaired. They're not designed to be opened. They're not designed to be worked on, which is a shame because of the price. You would want to use them for many, many years and not just throw them away in a year or two because they fail. So As far as my opinion goes, if the house would have been weathered more, I think I would have liked it more. I like it more now that it's been weathered. And my weathering isn't as good as other people's, and I understand that. But once you take it apart and put it back together, it'll be easier in the future. Hopefully this video will help people disassemble and reassemble, and you won't make any big mistakes like I almost did. So I need to double check myself. Rudy Martinez is the one who did suggest this on YouTube to see if these eyes could be lit up. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have taken my house apart to try it myself. So, and I'm sure some people have noticed my eyes aren't in the same position they were when the house was first disassembled. I do that purposely. I want it to be different. They're slightly off of what is shipped from Lemax. If you want to mark the gears with a Sharpie so you know their timing, when you reassemble it, you can do so. So that way the eyes are in the correct spots. The first time I was assembling it, when I was practicing the assembly to make sure I had all the gears lined up, the eyes were together. They were basically just looking at the same position. So don't want that. It doesn't look crazy. So, as far as what I see as failure points on this, just for future heads-up repairs, your failure point is going to be that big drive belt, which is right here behind the door, if you remember. Your next one's going to be this belt here. If you notice, it slows down and speeds up. That is because the flex, which is actually steeper than this one, these flat plates are slowing it down. The flat plates are what they glue the heads and skulls, pumpkins to. So this will probably be the first belt to fail. It's probably going to slip the gear or crack the gear. And then the belt will either vulcanize from storage or sitting for long periods of time, or it's just going to crack and fall off. So it's a thin belt. It's not a very thick belt. As far as the transmission goes inside, unless you store this in extreme heat, I don't foresee the gears having any problems. But most of them always break the smaller gear. But here is the weathering. If you go onto some of the Lemax forums online, especially on Facebook, you can find in the, I believe it's the I Love Spooky Town one, there's a post from Alyssa Davis. She does a good weathering job, better than mine. And then Spooky Villages, if you look at them on YouTube, they do reviews on Lemax. He talks about this house being a memory of an old video game that both him and I used to play, called Zombie Ate My Neighbors, where he played in the toy factory. By changing the colors, it makes it more reminiscent of that game, which he mentions in his video as well. So those are some other places to check, especially his, because he does a lot of reviews on these. He reviews them, I fix them. So overall, if you want to spend the money, it's not a bad house. I'd recommend weathering it. It makes it look spookier. Matches the theme of the spooky town. As far as repairability, once you crack all the glue that holds the little pieces together, it's a lot easier to fix. As you saw, it's a much more modular house, meaning it comes apart in little pieces and you can move the gears around. They don't care because they're all the same size. Like that gear and that gear are the same size. It's a little bit more user-friendly for the repair side. So I hope you enjoyed it. It was a very long 3-parter, not very common, but this is a little bit different way of doing the house. The only thing I need to do to it now is reattach this bottom, which is still sticky. Maybe I can attach it better than they did, where it's not sticking up. If it doesn't stay flush, I'll put some super glue or hot glue around it. Trying to get all the corners in. So, now you know if you ever have to take this apart, you do not have to take this bottom off. There we go, back on. All the way. You can just peel the edges if you want. Just peel it back so you can get to those tabs, because most of the tabs are on the edges. If you want to peel it off, go for it. You might even be able to do the whole thing without peeling any of the bottom off if you use screwdrivers that are long enough. So you can use a long, thin screwdriver to push the tabs in. There are a couple of broken pieces, which unfortunately I broke one tab off, and actually two tabs. One tab, one alignment, and then of course the corner of that speaker which you saw. So, but I am going to put some glue in the corner here, and because this little corner is lifting, I don't know if you can see it flex a little in the gap. And I'm probably gonna call it good. I like the way it came out with the weathering. It's all back together. The grill, a little bit more depth. And I'll touch up that one gear that's nice and shiny. And the boiler or exhaust fitting there on the back, I'll touch up. And I'll clean up all the glue strings, which is the joys of hot glue. So, thanks for watching. Hopefully this helps you in the future when your house breaks. Gives you some ideas on how to make it look better if you're not a fan of the colors, since it's the brightest house I think I've ever seen of theirs. And maybe make you a little less wary of it being a plastic house versus the porcelain and resin ones. So, thanks for watching. Until the next one. Flip it back one last time. The little green window, don't forget about that.